From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme 3 podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, and of course, our family and friends to the Gimme 3 podcast, a series for cinephiles. As you all know, or if you're new to the show, this is the podcast where we dive into 3 films connected by one theme. And before we jump in, I just want to give a quick spoiler alert. There will be mild to major spoilers in this episode as we are diving deep into our 3 films today. I'm Bella Efstratis, and I'm joined as always by my excellent co-host, Nicholas Ybarra. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, it's the season. It's movie season. It's the season where, you know, all the studios release their award darlings. And Sonia being in the Producers Guild of America, we get to go to a lot of preview screenings and get to see a lot of these amazing films before they're released, which is great because you don't have to, hear the noise, first. You gotta just kind of watch it and make your own, judgment of it without any outside voices influencing you. So yeah, I've just spent the last week every night mostly sitting in a theater, which is a great week for me.
That's the best. Yeah. Well, and today we also have a very special guest joining us. Welcome, writer, director, cinephile Ryan Lacen.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show with us. How are you doing? Have you been watching any great movies lately that you want to shout out?
Yeah, October is always my favorite month too. And I was telling Nick earlier, I was gone in Cape Cod for the last month and a half, filming a movie. So I missed basically every movie that kind of came out during that period. So right when I got back to LA, I went straight to the movie theater and saw 6 movies over the course of that weekend and caught up on every great movie from Anora to We Live in Time.
Yes.
The Substance. So many good films.
I know it's honestly hard to keep up right now.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I would also like to mention that Mr. Ryan Lacen has an award-winning feature film himself that is called All the World is Sleeping. And it is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Written and directed by my friend here, Ryan Lacen. And it is produced by Miss Sonia Maru, who we all know Sonia Maru from Sonia's Movie Minute. So
yes,
check that out on Paramount Plus. All the World is Sleeping. It stars Melissa Barrera, star of Scream and In the Heights. Amazing, amazing film. Amazing, amazing work by Mr. Lacen here.
Yes, please check it out, and then maybe jump on Letterboxd, give it a little review.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, 2024 is coming to an end, and I cannot believe I'm saying those words. I feel like I blinked, and suddenly it's November. But we couldn't go the whole year without doing an anniversary episode for some of the amazing 2004 movies that are now 20 years old, which is crazy. Obviously, there are so many bangers from that year. It's honestly impossible to choose the best of the best. So for this episode, we decided to narrow it down to 3 indie movies of 2004. But before we jump into the 3 films we've selected for this episode, I thought it would be fun to just do a little recap, shout out some of the greatest films of 2004, because unfortunately we can't talk about all of them. So first of all, we've got my favorite movie of all time, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So that was easily my personal favorite from the year. And the only reason we're not talking about it in this episode is because we already did in our very first episode of the podcast.
It was because I'm an asshole and I said, no, Bella, you cannot talk about it again within the first 8 months of the podcast.
I thought about
it. She wanted to. I was like, no.
But yeah, so if you guys love that movie as much as me, definitely go check out that first episode if you haven't. And then the Academy Award for 2004's Best Picture went to Clint Eastwood's $1 Million Baby. It was up against The Aviator, Finding Neverland, Ray, and Sideways. Do you guys have thoughts on this?
Yeah, Nick, what's your opinion of $1 Million Baby?
Yeah.
Well, I don't love it. it was the beginning of Clint Eastwood's intense, conservative politics rearing its head in his films. And it was just a little overbearing in that movie. So I wasn't a fan of it a lot when it came out, and I'm less of a fan of it now. I also really strongly dislike the look of that film. Gray is not my favorite color palette. But I do love Morgan Freeman. Yes. So there's that.
That's all you really need.
And I love Hilary Swank too. I'm a Swank guy. I love some Hilary Swank. I do.
She's great.
I do like that the film took a swing. I know everybody hates how the second half of the movie becomes a completely different film. Right. And although I do think maybe it doesn't work as a whole, I think it was interesting that they're like, okay, cool. We're going to completely pivot, completely change the entire scope of what this movie is and become a completely separate film.
Totally.
So
right.
Totally. He took a swing, whether or not it worked or not. Well, I guess it did work because it won the Oscar.
It won the Academy Award.
Yeah. And it was up against some really amazing movies as well. I noticed there were a lot of biopics in 2004. It seems like Hollywood got hooked on them, and obviously a lot of them were pretty much all about men, of course, and then they just kept making them. They can't be stopped. So although there was one big one about a woman, Mike Leigh's Vera Drake, which won the Golden Lion at Venice Film Festival that year. So I had to shout that out. Now, most importantly, we also got one of, if not the best sequel of all time, Shrek 2. It was the highest grossing film of that year. It made about $936 million worldwide. And at the time, it was the highest grossing animated movie of all time.
Wow.
Crazy. Yeah.
Wowie.
Runner-up was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which makes me proud. The best movie in the series. Feel free to DM me if you disagree. And we also talked about that in our Harry Potter films episode. Otherwise, I would have picked that one too. In third place, we've got Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, another classic sequel. I honestly need to revisit those. Are you guys Spider-Man fans? The Tobey Maguire?
Spider-Man 1 and 2, yes. Spider-Man 3, pretty rough.
Yeah, that's what I remember as well.
But 2 was definitely a good sequel,
Yeah.
The sequels go.
I remember enjoying it. I don't think I've seen it since it was in theaters, but I remember in the theater and having a good time.
Yeah. Well, we also got The Incredibles, The Passion of the Christ.
Woo-wee! I remember seeing The Passion of the Christ in the theater. Holy jeez. Seeing Jesus Christ's ribs get ripped out. My Lord.
2 hours of pure torture.
Yeah.
And then, The Day After Tomorrow, Meet the Fockers, Troy, Shark Tale, and Ocean's 12. And those were the top 10 highest grossing movies of 2004, believe it or not.
That is a lot of sequels.
Right? Yeah.
That is a lot of sequels. Some things never change.
Some things never change. Yeah, I know. We're right back at the start.
I'm honestly surprised Passion of the Christ wasn't higher, just because
I know.
Maybe it's because my family is Catholic, so that was just like the talk of the year when there's like everybody was talking about the Passion of the Christ.
I've actually only seen the Family Guy episode of it. I probably should watch the movie itself.
Well, you know the story.
Honestly, that was my biggest issue about that movie, though, is you get no backstory. You just basically jump in straight into like, cool, this person's just getting tortured for 2 hours.
Oh, God.
Right.
And I walk out, I was like, wait, where's the backstory? And everyone's like, it's the Bible. The Bible's the backstory. Everybody knows it. I was like, well, yeah, but I mean, as a film, it might be nice to have a little, subtext here.
That's a great point. Yeah. Well, of course, that list doesn't even begin to showcase some of the most iconic and timeless films of 2004. First of all, the cultural reset that was Mean Girls, probably one of the most quoted films of all time, completely changed the game. And it was honestly a great year for comedies and rom-coms as well. We got Shaun of the Dead, 13 Going on 30, Anchorman, 50 First Dates, which I love.
That's a good one.
Dodgeball, Along Came Polly, and of course White Chicks, a classic.
White chicks.
And we also got one of the most iconic romances of all time, The Notebook. You know, I would say its great competitor that year was Before Sunset, the sequel in Richard Linklater's Sunset trilogy. Another one we covered in an episode earlier this year.
We've covered so many of these movies on our podcast already. Wow.
I know.
Shaun of the Dead, The Notebook. Right? No, we didn't cover The Notebook, but Before Sunset.
Yeah, not yet. We'll do a what's his name? Steve Sparks.
Nicholas Sparks.
Nicholas Sparks, yeah. Give me 3 Nicholas Sparks.
Now that's going to be a rough podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the horror genre, we got Saw, which is now one of the biggest horror movie franchises ever. Crazy to think that it all began here. Once again, followed by a bunch of other remakes and sequels like Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, The Grudge, Seed of Chucky, Blade Trinity, Ginger Snaps 2. I don't know. There were a bunch of wild ones this year. Do you guys have any good indie horror movie recommendations from 2004 off the top of your head?
Well, off your list right there, I just realized I don't even know what Ginger Snaps 1 is. So now I need to go back and figure out that.
That's a very small movie. Yeah. Ginger Snaps a very small movie. I mean, The Seed of Chucky is probably one of the more batshit crazy movies of 2004. Extreme in every sense of the word, mostly conceptually. So, I mean, I don't know. My brain stopped working and started thinking about The Seed of Chucky as soon as I dropped that title. So.
All right. Well, everyone go check out Seed of Chucky.
Club Dread was another one, too. That's not the best movie and not the greatest horror film, but a fun entry in the Broken Lizards, franchise.
Right.
Right. I'll have to check that one out. Well, and finally, I just have to shout out some kids' movies that define my childhood because I was a small child in the year of 2004. And I say this because I really need to brush up on my 2004 classics. When I was choosing a movie that I had seen for this, pretty much all of them were like kids' movies. But there were honestly so many bangers. So I almost picked Ella Enchanted for this episode because I love that movie so much. I'm a massive Anne Hathaway fan, and that's just one of my favorites. We also got Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, and I have to shout that out because it's insane to think that Jim Carrey did that and Eternal Sunshine in the same year. Like, just completely opposite ends of the spectrum, really proving his incredible range right there. We also got The Polar Express, which was a holiday classic and kind of scared the shit out of me as a kid. And then Lion King 1.5. I know some of y'all are sleeping on that shit. I don't care what anyone says, that movie is a staple of my childhood. And then my final two would be Barbie and the Princess and the Pauper, the most underrated musical ever made. I'm telling you, Nick, we're gonna have to do a Barbie episode.
I'm down. I got no qualms with Barbie.
And finally, my favorite Miyazaki film came out this year with Howl's Moving Castle, so it's hard not to choose that one as well. Nick and Ryan, do you guys have any other favorite 2004 movies that you want to shout out?
Have you both ever seen the movie Birth with Nicole Kidman?
Yes.
No, I wanted to choose that because I haven't seen it, but then I was wary too.
Yeah, that was almost going to be my pick for this episode too. And I haven't rewatched it in a long time, so I don't know how it holds up. But I still remember seeing that in the theater and just walking out and be like, what the fuck did I just watch? Jonathan Glazer, I believe it's his second film, but it's so beautifully shot, such a dynamic performance by Nicole Kidman. And obviously the subject matter is, it's a pretty intriguing, provocative, and, polarizing. But it's a good film to kind of like watch as a cinephile, then go back and like to discuss afterwards.
I love it. Definitely want to check that out.
Really, I'm a big fan of the film Closer, starring Jude Law, Julia Roberts, Natalie Portman, and Clive Owen. I think that movie is tremendous. Mike Nichols joint, love it. And The Aviator is The Aviator, man. It kicks ass. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Like another indie gem, like underrated darling, would be a film called Maria Full of Grace. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, Maria Full of Grace. Incredible film. In fact, one day my mom called me not too long ago, and she found, there's like a bunch of my old DVDs left at her house. And she said, "This movie I found, Maria Full of Grace. Did you direct this one? This looks like a Nick Ybarra movie." I was like, I wish I directed Maria Full of Grace, but I did not direct Maria Full of Grace.
What a great compliment, though. The fact that your mom was like, this feels like a Nick joint.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, those are some other good ones to check out.
I'm definitely going to have to watch those. Well, now that we've raved about all the amazing movies that didn't make the cut for this episode, it's time to dive into the 3 fantastic films that did. So, Nick, take us away.
Yes, first up we have since we're talking about, great independent cinema today, Spirit Award winning, Academy Award winning also film. This was a seminal film in my development as a writer and as a movie watcher. And of course, I'm talking about Sideways by Alexander Payne. It's written by Payne and Jim Taylor, and it stars my goat, Paul Giamatti, Thomas Haden Church, Virginia Madsen, and Sandra Oh. And the film follows Miles, who's played by Paul Giamatti. And this man is about 40 or so. He's just over the hill. He is divorced. He is a struggling writer, and he can't seem to get that elusive first publication. He struggles with depression and alcoholism, and he's a bit of a serial liar also. I promise you this is a comedy. So Miles is taking his college buddy, Jack, for a week-long wine tour. This is a pseudo bachelor party before Jack ties the knot with a well-to-do woman. And Jack is a womanizer, and he is a loudmouth, and he's kind of a shitbag, and he's also a serial liar. And they have an interesting dynamic, this duo, Miles and Jack. They've got less in common than they did when they were college roommates. They got different energies, they got different worldviews, they got different goals, but they do love each other. And another thing that Miles loves, one thing that moves Miles, that sweeps him off his feet amidst his depression and his neg head downer shit, as Jack describes, is wine. Wine is what gets this guy off, particularly Pinot Noir, hence this wine tour. And it's on this wine tour that Jack sees a potential connection between Miles and one of Miles' local friends from, wine country, Maya, a brilliant and beautiful wine connoisseur who may understand wine and in turn may understand Miles more than anybody else he's known. So what throws a chink in this potential life-altering love connection is that Jack, who can't seem to keep his one-eyed monster in his pants, also starts having an affair with Maya's friend Stephanie. And what precedes is a week-long adventure of comedy, adventure, misadventures, and a shitload of drinking. We will start with our guest here, Ryan Lacen. Initial thoughts on Sideways, and do you remember seeing this movie for the first time?
Yeah. One, love Sideways. Every time I watch it, I leave wanting to drink a bottle of very fancy wine while eating a cheeseburger.
Yes.
I remember seeing this movie right when it came out in the theaters with my mom and grandmother, which, my mom and grandmother are both big cinephiles too. And, we all loved it. But there's one scene where a naked man runs out with his, penis right in front of the camera. And I just looked over at my grandmother, who's cracking up the loudest in the theater, just loving that scene. And like people are clapping. I was like, this movie rocks.
Yeah. Yeah, you always forget about the floppy dick just barreling towards Miles and Jack.
Sideways is so great though. I mean, it's such a on the surface it is like this buddy movie, but it goes into so much more, especially the older you get, rewatching the film. I feel like, younger rewatching, I'm like, oh, Thomas Haden Church, he's so cool. Now rewatching, I was like, man, I feel like I'm more like Paul Giamatti now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I read this article that said that Alexander Payne called the author Rex Pickett and told him that he loved the novel because all the characters in it were so fucking pathetic. And I thought that was an interesting thing. It's like to read the book and be like, I love it because every character in the film, at least the two protagonists, are pathetic, but also so like relatable. Mm-hmm. And originally, I guess he talked to George Clooney about playing the Jack character. Which I think Clooney would have been good, but there's something really unique and relatable about Thomas Haden Church's version of Jack that I think makes this movie what it is.
There's a goofiness to Thomas Haden Church's performance that like enable it. There's that endearing part where it's just like, God damn, you're just such a fucking goofball. If it was George Clooney, I feel like he's too good looking to be that much of an asshole.
Yeah, he's too cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's not very goofy, like,
yeah,
because you're also like, oh, why is he friends with this person, and vice versa? You know what I mean? Like, why do these two hang out with each other?
Right. Yeah. So, hey, sometimes you hang on to those friends for 20, 30 years because they've been your friend for 20, 30 years.
I love that line too, where he's like, Jack, he was just my old college roommate.
Yeah.
And sometimes too, you have these relationships that you've known for like 20 years or whatever the amount of time is. And you start to think like, what do I even have in common with this person besides just time and, college?
Right. Bella, what were your thoughts on Sideways? Had you seen this one before?
Yeah, I actually watched it. Well, I watched it for the first time earlier this year. So, yeah, and I loved it the first time, loved it even more the second time. This movie is literally like wine in that, like you said, I feel like every time you come back to it, you'll get more out of it. Your perspective will change on things. And yeah, even though it was nominated for Best Picture and it has like so much acclaim, I still feel like this movie is criminally underrated. Like it's just that good. But yeah, and I totally agree with some of the things you were saying, Ryan, where like this movie has such a brilliant balance of like its playful comedic moments, but then also the deep existential reality checks that Miles is kind of going through all throughout the film. And like, it's so amazing to watch, and it just feels so effortless from beginning to end. Like it feels like some next level filmmaking right there.
And it should have beat $1 Million Baby for Best Picture.
Certainly. This was, I think, the first year where I said, you know what? I think the Oscars might be bullshit because Mr. Paul Giamatti was not even nominated for this movie.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Criminal.
Yeah. That's insane.
So this movie was instantly one of my favorites. I, Ryan, also saw this in the theaters with my mom and my grandma, funny enough. And my grandma was also laughing at the floppy dick scene. I saw this movie multiple times in the theater. And I was in high school. And that always trips Sonia out because she's like, God, that movie is so adult. Why did you love it so much while you were so young? And I can't exactly explain it, but I think this is the movie where it all kind of started to click for me. You know, I talked a lot on the show about like how I loved movies as a kid and kind of knew I always wanted to do something in film. And I was fascinated by it. But I think I was, really interested in the pageantry of movies, and great writing was nothing more than great writing to me. It was all magic, it was all just like a magic trick to me. Sideways, I think, was at least one of my first cognitive memories where I started to understand what the filmmakers were doing and why. And I remember the scene that did it. And it's the scene where Miles and Maya are sitting on the porch while their friends are getting their fuck on in the, inside. And this beautiful warm light is there. And the whole scene's kind of mostly comprised of medium shots and close-ups on Paul Giamatti and Virginia Madsen. And Maya asks Miles why he is so into Pinot Noir. And he talks about, how it's a hard grape to grow, how it's temperamental, how it doesn't thrive in every environment. And as a kid watching this, I was like, holy shit, he's Pinot. That's why he likes Pinot, because he is Pinot. He relates to it. Not, it's not a revelatory observation. It's like kind of obvious. But for an aspiring writer, something like clicked in me. And then Miles asks Maya about why she loves wine. And she gives this gorgeous romantic answer about how wine is alive and how it's constantly evolving. I had, at whatever age I was, 15 or something, I had none of the life experience that either of these people had. Couldn't be further, actually, from the life experience that these people had. I never drank a sip of wine. I had never been in love, but I was so moved by this scene and this writing and these performances. And 20 years later and 150 viewings later, that scene still floors me. It still holds up.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. It's my favorite scene in the whole movie.
I mean, that's the heart of the whole movie in that one scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how the movie also asks you, like, what kind of wine drinker are you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
For myself too, like I predominantly used to be like a red wine drinker, but like recently kind of getting more into the whites, I kind of like this little buttery Chardonnay. New Mexico actually has a lot of really good wine too. They make this like red chili blend that's like this red wine, but also a green chili white. I highly recommend.
Oh, that sounds
I
so
like
good.
those green chili whites from New Mexico, Ryan. You brought me a couple sometimes when you come back from home, and I just think they're delicious.
Yeah, especially for a nice hot summer day, a little crisp,
with
a little
yes.
spice.
That sounds so good.
I think that might be the next movie, making like a sideways version in New Mexico with all New Mexican red chili and green chili wines.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, this film, in addition to, like being a big hit, it grossed over $100 million at the box office.
The good old days.
The good old days. This movie had an effect on the actual economy, the wine economy. There's that famous line that started the whole thing, that Jack and Miles are going to their double date with the girls, and Miles is about to have one of his freakouts, and Jack's like, if the girls want to order Merlot, we're going to order Merlot. And he goes, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. In 2009, Sonoma State University conducted and released a study, and it found that Sideways significantly slowed the growth of Merlot sales and volume and caused its prices to drop into a tailspin. But that was not the case for wine as a whole, because the film's main effect was that the U.S. wine industry was booming after the release of Sideways, and especially Pinot Noir, and overall wine consumption of Pinot Noir was skyrocketing. And they call this the Sideways effect, which is now like a economic term when a piece of pop culture has like a direct effect on a niche portion of an industry. The Sideways effect. Incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
We'll say every time I watch this movie, I always want to go get a glass of Pinot Noir. So it definitely works.
It works.
It does.
It works, man. Any other final thoughts on Sideways before we move on? I could talk about this movie for about 75 hours because I've told you I've seen it 150 times. Actually, one thing I do want to shout out is Virginia Madsen is I get more entranced with her and her performance every time I watch this. Her performance it kind of flies under the radar because Paul Giamatti and Thomas Haden Church are so like there in your face and up front with their amazing performances. But Virginia Madsen's performance is really incredible in this.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
She's amazing. Yeah. Also, shout out Solvang. So anyone that's in California visiting, stop by Solvang, where a lot of Sideways takes place. It's such a cool like little town.
Absolutely.
I really wanted to go.
You can go to the real Hitching Post and go have a steak dinner and get a glass of Pinot Noir, not Merlot.
I do want to do like a Sideways road trip. Watching it, I was like, I want to go on a road trip.
The Sideways tour. Do it.
Yeah.
I will also shout out, I haven't read the third book, but Sideways the novel by Rex Pickett kicks ass. There is a sequel to it called Vertical, which is also really good. And if you think Sideways gets a little bleak, yeah, right. Buckle up for Vertical. And then there's a third book, which I have not read, called Sideways Chile, which takes place in New Mexico. No, I'm just kidding. It takes place in Chile.
Is Jack in all the books too? Or is he at least in Vertical? Or is it just basically the Paul Giamatti character, Miles?
He is, I think, in it for a little bit. He's definitely a character, but it's mostly about Miles. It's very meta. The concept of Vertical is that Miles has written a book about the trip that he took with Jack, and it got bought and turned into a movie. And so now he's like a very famous writer, and everybody wants to know what he thinks about wine. So he's like a wine celebrity now, and he's kind of like dealing with that. And it's a road trip with him and his mother as they're like going on like a press tour.
Oh, interesting. How do you think that would make for a film, for a follow-up sequel?
I think it would have made a great film if they had done it, maybe 10 years ago. I think now probably the time has passed. But I'm glad they didn't, overall. Like the character's great. The character's so rich and layered and so human that like it would make a good movie. But I think that Sideways is so perfect as a film. Why fudge with it? If you're listening to this, Alexander Payne, please do not make Vertical the movie. There's no need. You nailed it. You've done it. There, you can go nowhere but down.
Sideways is so good. Let's keep it there.
Yeah, let's keep it there. All right, Sideways. It is available to stream. Where is it available to stream? It's on Hulu, allegedly. And Disney Plus? Oh, because Disney bought Fox, and this is a Fox Searchlight joint. That is really weird. That Sideways is on Disney Plus.
Kids, go watch Sideways.
Kids, go watch Sideways and see a floppy dick coming at your screen.
You can do your double feature of Lion King 1.5 and Sideways.
Oh, jeez. All right, Ryan Lacen now is going to take it away with his pick.
All right, my pick is a movie that most people probably have never heard of, called Endearing Love. It's a movie that's based off the novel of the same name. It shows how unforeseen accidents can change our lives forever and test our endurance for both guilt and love. It stars Daniel Craig, who plays this smug writer and professor who feels like he has control over everything in his life. His career, his relationship with the girlfriend Claire, played by the amazing Samantha Morton, and his personal views on like the meaning of love and connection. Then this like harrowing accident ties him to this lonely wanderer named Jed, played by Reese Ifans. From that moment on, their relationship and those around them get hurled into this unraveling chaos as a film shifts into what becomes like a psychological thriller. What did you guys think of Endearing Love?
I had never heard of this one before, and oh my god, this movie is insane. I I really did not expect it to go in the direction that it went, but I honestly really enjoyed it. I'm always down for a psychological thriller. I love those, and the performances in this film just I think really make it. Like they are so gripping and sometimes just so terrifying. Resci fans, I'm looking at you. He is the freakiest fucker ever. And
So
um
freaky.
yeah, even like I'm not gonna lie, when I was prepping my notes for this, I was home alone and it was really dark and I got a little jumpy just thinking about his scenes. Like it's the stuff of nightmares in this movie. And he ruined the Beach Boys God Only Knows for me, which is really sad because I was just listening to that the other day.
What a creepy scene.
What a creepy
It
scene.
gives me like chills just thinking about it.
Did you watch a trailer before, or did you just go in blind?
No, I went in completely blind. So I had no idea it was gonna go in in like the stalker direction. I thought that this movie would be like just kind of a psychological drama, if you will, of like Daniel Craig kind of just losing his shit. But yeah, once they introduced like the stalker aspect, I was like, oh shit, we're doing this now. Like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I thought this movie surprised me also. And I thought it was going to be like some heartfelt, you know, lovable drama, you know, some tear jerker thing. Because one, the title is Enduring Love.
Right. Yeah.
And then also the score for, I think, like a good first part of this movie is like very upbeat and like jovial. And I'm like, what you're telling me it's one thing, and now I'm freaked out here. It was it was an odd choice, but I think it worked because it totally spinned the perspective very interestingly. This director, what's his name?
Roger Michel.
Roger Michel. He's into these obsession with stranger stories. You know, he did that My Cousin Rachel movie with Rachel Weisz, and then he did one of my favorite schlocky movies, Changing Lanes. I love Changing Lanes.
Oh, me too. Everybody hates on that film, but I love it.
I love it. I think it kicks ass, and this is a little bit more in the lane of Changing Lanes, but arguably way darker.
So for me, in 2004, I was in college at that time, and I was taking a film class, and somebody comes into the film class and talks about this festival called the Telluride Film Festival. And at that time, like, we'd all heard about Sundance, but I had no idea what Telluride was. But they were doing this thing where like you had to write a paper about a movie, then they pick 50 students from across the United States, and they take them to the Telluride Film Festival for the student symposium. Awesome. I wrote a paper on the 25th hour, and nice. I got selected.
Love it.
So I went to the 2004 Telluride Film Festival and won the most amazing festival in the United States. It's so incredible. But for a week, we got to like see all the films. We had like a mentorship, and one of the films we saw was this movie. So I remember like we saw a bunch of other films like House of Flying Daggers,
cool.
Which was amazing. But like all these films that we saw, everybody walked out like with the same expression, like, oh, that movie was amazing. This was so good. And then when we saw Enduring Love, I just remember walking out and it felt so polarizing. Like half the audience and the people from our symposium were like, I love this movie. It's incredible. And the other half were like, I hate it. It's a mess. And I remember thinking at that time too, I was like, this is what cinema is. It's like people like one half loving a film, the other half not understanding it or not liking it, and having like a debate and being able to go talk about it for 45 minutes. And and for me personally, as a filmmaker, I'd much rather make something that, people react to than like a film that is just, it's fine. It's whatever. You walk out, you kind of forget it.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of remember from Enduring Love. It's like definitely a talking piece. And the film is like, it's got some beautiful, incredible cinematography. It is a little messy at
Yes.
times, and the plot can get a little like convoluted or feel like it is a little bit more, I guess, meaningful than it might be. But then again, on the flip side of that too, you can also decipher so many elements of it between like guilt and the obsession and love, and I guess the way we even like treat people through trauma, and debate,
Mhm.
each character's kind of reaction to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And also the film is
Yeah.
like so unhinged too. And like to get
It's
into like a little bit of like spoiler, there's like two moments in the film that like each time I've watched it, even though I know what's gonna happen, I have this audible reaction. And the first one was in the very beginning. It starts off, in this very peaceful like picnic and this like picturesque park. And then the second
Mhm.
like this balloon crashes down, it jumps into pure chaotic energy of like, what the hell is going on? And it ends in one of the most like for me like affecting shots of like,
Mm.
holy shit, this person just died in this like most tragic way.
That whole sequence is so well directed because you just don't know. I'm going through what the characters are going through, which is like trying to figure out how to stop this balloon. It's like, what do
Mhm.
you do here? Like, do you hold the balloon down? Do you grab the rope? Like, the kids doing the wrong thing? It was really immersive, that scene, and there's some really crazy shots in that. And what a bold, get you in your seat way to open a film.
Oh yeah.
And the cast is so great too. Like Daniel Craig, like at this point we all know Daniel Craig as like Bond, but this was like before
Right.
James Bond era. And he's so great when he goes insane in a film, when he basically loses it. He's one of the greatest
Mhm.
like cussers in the history of film. When he drops like an F bomb, he does it in such like a kind of raw, dirty way.
Yes.
And Reese, playing that like stalker kind of. At times you're almost like rooting for him. The other times like I never want to be alone in a room with this person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first moved to LA, one of the first gigs I ever got was on Spider-Man, but the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and he plays the villain in. And I remember like I was running a photography unit on that set one day, and we are basically just getting a bunch of pictures of like Reese, that they were gonna like put together with like his wife and family in the movie to put like in picture frames around the set. And we were doing this one shot of him where he's like sitting on this chair and he's supposed to be holding his like 5-year-old son and just like smiling at him. And the photographer was like, man, I'm not getting from him what we need. It's like Reese is staring at like this open space, but it's not actually connecting. So he looks at me, he's like, hey Ryan, how about you go sit in his lap and you just pretend like you're the 5-year-old kid. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I go,
What?
I sit on his lap. Reese puts his arms around me and he's like staring at me as the photographer is taking all these like photos. And it's one of those moments where like we're both like good sports, just kind of taking it in and pretending like this wasn't this like weird moment. And he's also that type of guy, like he smells like cigarettes and as if he just had like a full night of like drinking whiskey. He's like that type of guy. Super nice guy, really nice and very professional. But I was like, I wonder whatever happened to like the real life photos of me just sitting in Reese Ifan's lap.
Oh my god.
If anybody's listening to this and has those photos, I will pay money, big money
Yeah.
to get those photos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so
Glamorous
You should have
Hollywood.
while you were sitting in his lap, you should have told him, I wish I really hadn't seen Enduring Love right now.
Or I should just start singing the Beach Boys song.
Yeah. God only knows.
That would have been awesome.
That would have been awesome. You probably would have broke. You probably would have made him laugh.
Oh, that is such a good story.
That is one thing I did think about while watching this with when you're talking about Daniel Craig was somebody at the big studios, was like, all right, we got to find a new goddamn James Bond. We need that guy from Enduring Love. That is our James Bond.
Which is so wild too, because you see him and nothing about this performance, or even I guess like his career around that moment, makes you think like, yes, this is going to be the most attractive like action star in the history of like this franchise.
Yeah, that's what I could not help but think about. I was just like, because I mean, Casino Royale was not long after this.
No, I feel like he did this and then Layer Cake, which might have come out in
Layer Cake was probably what did it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. But I was like, "Whoa, did he do this and then Bond right after?" But yeah, that makes more sense. The big question for me, this whole movie, was why not call the cops?
Yeah.
Which is also kind of weird too. There's so many moments where Daniel Craig's character should have just been like, "Hey, I'm going to call the cops and get them into it." But I don't know if it's like that underlying sense of guilt. But there also seems to be these moments where like he's enjoying
He's into it, yeah.
He's into it because like he laughs and kind of has these smiles that feel like this genuine, like I am liking this attention from, this other person that makes you think like, is he? I mean, because he's very forceful and saying like, "Hey, get away from me," and then he smiles and laughs at him. So I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Well, and there is that moment where the stalker brings up, what's his name, Jed?
Yeah.
Jed mentions, we're both lonely.
Yeah.
So there is that aspect to consider about it as well.
Yeah, they're both looking for that connection. And I think too, also being in that position where like you both experience something together.
Yeah.
That connects you.
Right.
Especially because like every time he tries to talk about it, his girlfriend's kind of just like, you should see someone, or like move on, or like she's not totally she's kind of dismissive of it. Like and even though he is like obsessing over the whole incident a lot, but it's obviously just because he's traumatized. And I feel like, anytime he sees Jed or interacts with Jed, he's like, he's like, oh, I could talk about this because he was there. Right. But then Jed is just so creepy that he's like, oh, I shouldn't open this door too wide.
There's also a scene in Act 3 that revolves around a knife that that moment too, like I literally almost screamed in the room when that happened. Even though I knew it was coming up, it just takes me by surprise every time.
And it's really heartbreaking and so scary because you put yourself in that situation. It's just like, oh, fuck this, dude.
Yeah.
And unflinching filmmaking too. It was just like, boom, this moment happens, continues on.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing that even though it is kind of like predictable, it's still so scary. And you're just like sitting in it, waiting for it to end. And yeah, they prolong it so much to the point where you're just like squirming in your seat.
Totally.
And that's like, that scene is also like Rhys Ifans' peak as one of the scariest characters of all time. Like he's in that moment, he's like just so repulsive and like beyond unnerving.
And it's all in the eyes too.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It is worth checking out. Enduring Love. And it is available to rent at your local video store. I recommend Vidiots. I recommend Cinephile Video. I recommend Videotech in Pasadena. You can also rent it on demand at wherever you stream your movies, wherever you get your films on demand. Enduring Love. Fascinating film. Thank you, Ryan, for bringing it to our attention.
Yeah.
I had not even heard of it, to be frank.
Right. Same.
Yeah. I remember texting you the name of the movie and you're like, wait, what's this movie?
So what the fuck is that? That's not $1 Million Baby. No, I'm just kidding. All right, my friends, we are going to take a quick break. And during that break, you are going to hear from Gimme 3 producer, LADFF festival director, and my wife, Sonia Maru, for a segment we call Sonia's Movie Minute. All that and more right here on the Gimme 3 podcast.
Hello, I'm Sonia, and this is my Movie Minute. 2004 is the first year of my adult life that I remember being really locked into all the movies that came out. I graduated from college in 2004 and moved to LA from my sleepy college town, Davis, California. I was already obsessed with movies and had minored in film studies, but in college that meant mostly watching older films. When I moved back to LA, I lived with my dad and stepmom, Jean. Jean is a member of the Writers Guild, which means that we got stacks and stacks of screeners during award season. She could also show her Writers Guild card at movie theaters and get herself and a guest, aka me, in for free. With all this access to movies and having a pretty minimal social life since I had just moved, I went all in. I watched every screener and went to the theater at least 2 or 3 times a week. It was amazing. In honor of this episode, I just rewatched a 2004 movie I loved at the time but hadn't seen since, I Heart Huckabees. Man, David O. Russell was firing on all cylinders during the first decade of his career. Huckabees perfectly walks the line of being heady, awkward, and hilarious all at once. The film is basically an exploration of various perspectives on existentialism, but it's presented in an incredibly approachable and engaging way. Every character in the ensemble cast is in the midst of a deep existential journey, and we follow them through the highs and the lows. Everyone's amazing, but I'll call out just a few favorites. Jason Schwartzman and Isabelle Huppert shoving each other's face in mud before making love in a bush. Naomi Watts' commercial for Huckabees in her Amish bonnet. Jonah Hill's small role as a clueless brat. Jude Law's American accent. And every single expression on Lily Tomlin's face. Before I go, I have to give love to a few other movies of 2004. Eternal Sunshine, Shaun of the Dead, Prisoner of Azkaban, Closer, Man on Fire, 50 First Dates, The Aviator, Before Sunset, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, Kung Fu Hustle, The Life Aquatic, The Incredibles, Hotel Rwanda, Kinsey, Fahrenheit 9/11, Bad Education, The Sea Inside, Maria Full of Grace, Born into Brothels. Okay, that was more than a few.
All right, welcome back to the Gimme 3 podcast, everybody. A series for cinephiles. This is a show where we pick 3 films connecting one theme. And the theme today, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of some of 2004's best indie darlings. And to help us out with this, we are joined by indie darling himself, Ryan Lacen. He picked a wonderful film, Enduring Love. I picked Sideways, modern classic. And now Bella is going to bring us home with her 2004 pick. Bella, take it away.
Yes, so I had to choose the beloved indie cult classic, Napoleon Dynamite. Jared Hess directed and co-wrote the film with his wife, Jerusha Hess, when they were just 25 years old. It was his debut feature film, and it's actually based on a 9-minute black and white 16mm short film that he made back in college just a few years earlier with Jon Heder as well, called Palooka. And one of the film's producers saw Palooka at the 2003 Slamdance Film Festival, and he convinced Jared Hess to drop out of school to make the feature-length film. So they got a $400,000 budget, and the film went on to gross $46.1 million worldwide. Jon Heder stars as Napoleon Dynamite, a painfully awkward and geeky high school kid navigating life in the small town of Preston, Idaho. He lives with his chat room-obsessed older brother, Kip, and their grandmother, who seems to love her pet llama, Tina, more than her own grandkids. It's the first day back at school after summer break, and there is quite a lot in store for Napoleon this year. After their grandmother's unexpected accident, their Uncle Rico swoops in to supervise. John Grise perfectly portrays this walking midlife crisis who obsesses with reliving his high school glory days, and he even ropes Kip into a ridiculous door-to-door get-rich-quick scheme, peddling random junk all over town and wreaking havoc on Napoleon's social life. At school, Napoleon befriends Pedro Sanchez, played by Efren Ramirez, the soft-spoken new kid who's just moved from Mexico, and Deb, a quirky, equally awkward but sweet girl who just might be the perfect match for Napoleon. The film follows Napoleon in a series of odd endeavors, but when Pedro decides to run for class president, Napoleon steps up as the ultimate wingman, delivering a one-of-a-kind campaign that has to be seen to be believed. Alrighty, what do you guys think of Napoleon Dynamite?
You want to go first, Ryan?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Love Napoleon Dynamite. I'm so glad you picked this movie too. Like, I haven't rewatched it in a while, but it's such, I mean, it's a one-of-a-kind film. There's really nothing else like Napoleon Dynamite. And I think for any like aspiring filmmakers, it's the perfect film to like study too, because it does a great example of like, hey, how can you take a very small budget, stretch it out enough to make something special, but to also take something that we haven't seen on film before, a very like unique character in a world that isn't explored as much in other films, and expand it into something that is uniquely this filmmaker's film.
Yes.
And it has one of the best opening credit sequences I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that opening credits sequence is amazing. It's got the names written on like hamburgers and hot dogs, and then, you know, the library cards, the library slip cards that are, you know, in your library books, and chapstick labels.
Yeah.
Also, too, you can tell like the film was made for $400,000, but when it was picked up, I guarantee they spent a decent chunk of change putting in all that music, because the Backstreet Boys song alone probably was like an extra $1 million that the studio spent on it.
Totally, yeah. When it starts with the White Stripes and then ends with the Backstreet Boys, it's like, all right, that they put some money into the soundtrack. But yeah, $400,000 production budget, we'll say.
Yeah,
exactly.
It looks so good too. I mean, talk about a filmmaker too that understands the language of the movie and creates it in every single location, every scene, every character. All the characters are uniquely, you know, who they are, but they all seem to fit into this world, but also a relatable view of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, where does it take place? Idaho? Is that the state?
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is all intentional or if it's, I mean, this is like the filmmaker shot it in the hometown that he grew up in, which is like, you look at this place and you're just like, wowza, there's nothing there, you know. It is like super isolated. And if you think about it like that's what all of these characters are like isolated, you know. You've got Napoleon, who's isolated in his own fantasy world, and, you know, Pedro's isolated when he first comes in, and he's like, you know, the Mexican kid, he's othered, and Kip's isolated at home. So the language of the film is this isolation, which the setting kind of influences, not just with the filmmaker, but the filmmaker, how he shoots it. You know, it's like all these wide shots where you see like one single house with no other house next to it, you know, or a character just standing center frame and just like a vast landscape surrounding him. So the language of the film works really, really well and kind of informs the subtext of the film. But man, when this movie came out, it hit like crack. Like, I mean, it was just different. And remember, they had the Vote for Pedro shirts selling at like Target. I mean, this thing became like a cultural phenomenon.
So much merch. Yeah.
Kind of going back to what you just said too, Nick, there's not a big plot to this film. There's not like this one thing that's driving everything forward, but it is just all about connection. You know, every single one of these characters are looking to be able to connect to not only the town, but to like to each other. I mean, you see that everything from like Napoleon to Kip, Uncle Rico. Yeah. Which I love that last shot of the film where like Uncle Rico's just like in the middle of like nowhere, you know, throwing the football at the video camera. And then the girl comes up on the bike and you just see like for the first time, like a genuine happiness when like he smiles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone kind of walks away from this film, you know, obviously like falling in love with Napoleon Dynamite, and he's obviously the biggest character in this. But on this last rewatch, for me, Kip was stealing every scene. Every scene that
yeah.
Kip was in, I was like, dude, this guy cracks me up.
Yeah, Kip was always my favorite as a kid.
His relationship with LaFonda, I'm like, I would watch a whole follow-up sequel on their first year together.
Yes, 100%.
I did not realize I'd seen this movie, a bunch of times growing up, and this time I watched it on Hulu, and I was like writing down notes while the credits were going. Did you guys know there's a post-credit sequence?
Yeah.
Oh,
The
yeah.
wedding.
Oh, yeah.
The wedding. I did not. This was my first time watching this. I was like, oh, look at this. I'd
Oh,
never seen it
it's
before.
one of the best sscenes in the whole movie.
My favorite shot of that is just when LaFonda's like brother or whoever the family member is just puts his head in his hands and just cannot watch what's happening.
Right.
So
Like,
good.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's such a good scene. My favorite part of it is watching Napoleon on the horse nearly like flat, like falling off of it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Which again, too, for a film that's only a $400,000 budget, it's like, usually you would have like, a stunt person writing it, or even all those scenes where Napoleon like climbs the fence and falls down. It's like, okay, cool, that'd be a stunt. But on this budget, it's like, that's John going over and doing all these things.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I worked with John Heder. I told Bella my first job ever in the film industry, first professional job, was on this kids show called the Aquabats Super Show. If anybody is privy to the band, the Aquabats, the ska band from the 90s, they had a kids show in the 2000s. It's called the Aquabats Super Show. And John Heder was one of the guest stars who played Eagle Claw, a like villain of the evil brother of the lead guitarist of the Aquabats. And I remember the first day he showed up, he's a super nice guy, like such an easygoing dude. And I like wanted to talk to him so badly about Napoleon Dynamite. And my AD was like, do not ask him about Napoleon Dynamite. Do not ask him about Napoleon Dynamite. And I was like, all right, I don't know if that was like a him thing or if it was just my AD not trying to have me be a weird little PA. But
that's so funny. Yeah.
But he was the nicest guy to work with and super, super cool. And I remember it being freaking freezing when we were shooting his scenes, and he was in this like very not warm, skin tight bad guy costume. I was like, oh, this poor bastard. We had to have him, he had to do the old trick where you like have him suck on ice so that way you don't see the breath.
Yeah.
The hot breath.
So tell me that he was just standing there eating tater tots the whole time too.
Yeah, he was. He definitely just eats tater tots, and he pulls them out of his pants, all kinds of compartments of his pants.
Another film too, every time I watch this, I'm like, oh man, I just want to get some tater tots, and maybe my lips are chapped. Do I need some chapstick on that too?
The sideways effect.
Yeah, the sideways effects. Tater tots goes through the roof after Napoleon Dynamite comes out.
That is so funny.
Have you seen all Jared Hess's other films, like Nacho Libre, Masterminds, Gunmen and Broncos?
Yeah, I saw Nacho Libre. I mean, here's the thing. It was like this Napoleon Dynamite's almost an impossible film to like follow up with, It's kind of like Kevin Smith trying to follow up Clerks. It's like you're never going to be able to like gross the amount of money that this movie that was made for nothing and made money did. But being a wrestling fan and a fan of the character that Nacho Libre is loosely based off of, that movie was not for me. And then I saw Masterminds, and I haven't seen anything else after that, which I just looked up yesterday. I was like, he's done a few other movies after Masterminds. I thought Masterminds was the last one he did, but he's done like 3 or 4 other ones that I have not seen. So,
and I think he's directing that new Minecraft movie, which
he is. I saw that.
It'll be big with all the kids.
Yeah,
for sure.
Fascinating career.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a time. This movie took me back because my cousins and I were big into Napoleon Dynamite when it came out. Pedro was one of the few Mexican representations we had in 2004, which is pretty sad. We're like, yeah, vote for Pedro.
Vote for Pedro. Yeah, I remember watching this movie for the first time. I must have been, which is kind of crazy. I must have been like 5 maybe or 6. But my uncle had brought it to like a family reunion, and he forced all of us to sit down and watch it. And I was like the firstborn on that side of the family, so it was just me and all the adults. And I didn't totally know what was going on, but everyone was just dying laughing, and I was like, "Oh, this must be amazing."
That's also the best family reunion I've ever heard. Everyone gets together, sits around, and watches Napoleon Dynamite. That is awesome.
It was awesome. I think I remember it because it was the first time I'd seen everyone like really into a movie that we were watching together. So it was very memorable. And it was really funny to like rewatch this again. I watched it with my boyfriend Jonathan, and we both hadn't seen it since we were like little kids. And so like putting together that Napoleon is like supposed to be 16 years old in this or something was just so funny to think about, because the last time I watched it, I thought he was so like, I was like, wow, that's so old. And now I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Fun movie. Stood the test of time. It's still got its cult following. And, when we were talking about that isolation stuff, perhaps that's why this movie has kind of stood the test of time and maintained its cult following, because loneliness and isolation seems to be, a growing feeling and issue, especially among the youth with like social media and stuff. So perhaps that's why it is. I mean, the movie felt almost dated even when it came out. But now even more so. But it's still like young people still find this movie and really dig it.
Do you think young kids watch this movie and they're like, "What is tetherball?"
Oh man, tetherball used to fuck me up because I'd always get the rope wrapped around my wrist and it'd cut me.
I love at the end of that scene too, like he beats her. They're playing this back and forth, and he just goes for it.
There was no world in which he was not gonna win.
Yeah.
That end scene is great.
All right, Napoleon Dynamite, streaming now on Hulu. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think of all these films, and let us know, if you will, what you think of what your favorite film from 2004 is. Indie or not indie. Let us know. We want to hear from you. And you can let us know by messaging us on Instagram. You can find us at Gimme3Podcast. That's GIMME, spell out 3 podcast. Gimme3 Podcast. You can also send us a text message by scrolling down to our episode description and clicking that link that says send us a text message. It'll go right to our DMs. And hell, we may even read it here on the air. Ryan, as we mentioned, Ryan Lacen has a movie out right now on Paramount Plus. It's called All the World is Sleeping, written and directed by our guest today, Ryan Lacen, starring Melissa Barrera. Incredible film, produced by Sonia Maru. I was the first AD on it as well. And I play sleeping bus man, so.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Nick has a good cameo in it.
Yeah.
I love that.
All the World is Sleeping. Check it out on Paramount Plus right now. Ryan, you want to tell our lovely listeners where they can find you on Letterboxd or the socials if you wish to share that info?
Yeah, so Ryan Lacen on Letterboxd and Instagram. Check me out. Stop by. Say hi.
Nice. Bella, do you want to tell the lovely folks where they can find you on Instagram or the socials?
You guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile or on Letterboxd at Efstratis.
Nice. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Nicholas Ybarra, on Instagram at Nicholas Ybarra, and on Twitter, also known as X, even though it is a cesspool currently, but I'm there for some reason, at Nicholas P. Ybarra, and the P stands for Pinot. Thank you all for listening to the Gimme 3 podcast, and we will see you at the movies.